Poddin My Noggin, hosted by CK Sims, creating a platform to elevate, educate, and heal by creating a space where people can share their stories of struggle, triumph, and redemption. CKS Media.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Poddin My Noggin. I'm your host, CK Sims, and today we are joined by DJ Van Der Venter.
Close enough. I like it.
Okay, but what did you say? Can you say it?
Van Der Venter. Yeah, I mean, you got it.
Okay, perfect. So DJ comes to us all the way from Washington, right?
Correct.
And it's quite early there this morning. We're filming early. So DJ, thanks for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for having me, CK.
No problem. So lots to talk about. So you are young, is my first observation.
Thank you. I'm flattered, really. I appreciate it.
How old are you? I'm very curious.
I'm 25.
You're 25, and you are the Chief Operations Officer of Dr. Telx. Okay, and you had your role there had first been President of, what was it? President of Product Business Development?
I've pretty much had the same role the whole time, more or less. I've just become a little more involved in running the business as we've grown and evolved. So more or less, I started off by just helping the business take off, which
Okay.
it's only been about maybe 7 months or so, 8 months since we first started. So I helped get the business off the ground, and now I'm just focusing more on developing it since it's already off the ground, if that makes sense. So,
No, it does, absolutely. So it was a startup.
for sure, yes.
Okay. So I'm interested because I've read some of the reviews on you on the medium that we're using, and I looked at your LinkedIn page. So 25 years old. But here's the thing that really caught my attention initially is that you have some adversity in your young life so far. One would categorize it as losing it all.
You could say that, maybe.
So let's start there because this show really does focus on people who have overcome adversity and
For
then
sure.
come out the other side to define their own version of success.
For sure, absolutely.
So let's start there.
Okay. It is something that I figured would get brought up. It's something I am open with, but typically don't talk about a ton. So when I was 18, I was in high school still. I turned 18 in April, would have graduated in June or end of May, around that time. And essentially where I was at that point was I was a pretty decent actor in high school. I worked with a producer for Fox just to see a little bit more about the industry, get into the acting world. And then to summarize the story, a cop knocked on my door and someone spread some rumors and I got locked up, arrested, expelled from school out of nowhere, and I had no idea what happened. And that's obviously the very quick summarized version of it. But so after that, it wasn't as much that everything got taken away from me physically. It was more I had no interest in acting or pursuing any of that afterwards, just due to all the drama that happened and came with it. And I would say for probably the next 6 months, that was probably one of the hardest times. I wouldn't say, it's hard to determine what's the hardest time of your life, but I would say that time was probably the hardest because of how it affected those around me and my loved ones. Because
I can sense that you're not super comfortable with talking about the details of what was said or how.
I'm comfortable talking as much as I can. There's a couple reasons I try not to, is because of just legal reasons. I try to leave some things out of the picture.
We don't want any legal issues happening to you, of course.
And I just don't want to speak poorly of any party, of course.
I'm processing in my mind. So you're 18 years old. You're relatively happy doing your thing, exploring, acting, working with a producer from Fox. And then all of a sudden something happens. We don't need to go into what it is or what was said or any of those particular things. but you were arrested and you said locked up. You spent time in.
So it was actually Mother's Day weekend. So actually, that was about 3 days. It wasn't super long. Um, it was long for an 18-year-old who barely turned 18 and was raised in a good home. I never even been suspended before. Never had detention. It was the trouble world was not something I was familiar with. So,
I can imagine. Did you? It was just like the precinct, like city jail, or did they ship you off somewhere, or
it was just the county jail, just in
county
my
jail?
city. So, yeah, just got picked up on a Saturday night, and that was that.
And were you blindsided by everything that happened? Like,
Yes. So, I'll share as much as I think is appropriate, which is, I got arrested for something that a lot of mostly males get arrested for, which sometimes it is true and sometimes it is not true. And obviously, I understand and I feel for both parties, depending on whatever actually happened. It's one of those things that those situations are hard to determine, especially just from word of mouth. But um, because of that experience, I I met other people that probably went through the same thing I did and just ended up in a much worse situation because of it. It's still affecting them 7 years later, whereas I was able to obviously overcome it and make my life much better. But so, as far as your question for if I was blindsided, I would say the whole ride to the jail, I had no idea what, why I was going there, what happened, what anything was. I was just had all sorts of questions in my head. And when I'm not sure if you're super familiar with the process of getting arrested, but I would hope not. But
no, I was arrested one time, but let go, but without processing.
okay, so
But
that's
so
good
yeah,
then.
so no, but I don't.
Okay,
I've
so
never been to jail.
essentially, when you might know this, then when you get to the actual jail itself, they kind of read off like a file to you about the reasons why you're there,
Yes.
and then that's when I was like, I see. So this is. I essentially just thought in my head, I'm screwed. We'll see what happens. That's all you can think when you're a male that's getting accused of something very serious. So
So I mean, I can piece together what it is that you're talking
for sure,
about,
for sure.
and it's interesting. My brain wants to go deeper, but I will not. I will stop there. But however, the thing is that you're one thing we can say is that we don't know, right? Like we know that your experience was clearly different than their experience, right? Would we say that correctly?
I wouldn't say that. I would say someone very clearly lied, and who knows the reasons because of it. But it's something that I had to pay the price for and had to overcome, regardless of the reason for it. It was
And
it
we
was.
do know that this happens. We do know that this happens. And I'll be honest with you, DJ.
Mhm.
I am a feminist, right?
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
Like I am without a question. I believe we should always believe, but I also at the same time know that sometimes, right, there are occurrences
Absolutely,
where it just doesn't it's not so cut and dry, and it's not um sometimes people also just make things up as well,
absolutely.
depending on the situation. But um I'm sorry that that happened to you, and I'm sorry that the person had that experience as well that we're talking about. But yeah, so you get to, I guess they call it booking,
Hmm.
right? And you're told, and then you are like, I'm screwed. So you in that moment you knew the gravity of the situation. You spent the weekend on Mother's Day weekend in jail,
Hmm.
which then I would imagine because of said accusation, this spreads like wildfire. People in your life find out about said accusation, the arrest, the 3 day stint in jail, all of those things. So whatever you had before is immediately sort of marred, if you will, because you're no longer just DJ. You're now DJ with this accusation attached to you,
Exactly, 100%.
right? So it changes your identity externally, which would naturally caused some sort of internal change as well,
For sure.
right?
Absolutely.
So you had all of these hopes and dreams and goals, and then you went through this process. I'm assuming there was possibly a trial or whatever the situation may be. I don't know. Also grueling for both sides, for everybody involved, and your immediate family as well, right? Like, it's
Absolutely.
just the gravity of the whole thing is massive. So you come out. You have 6 months that you had mentioned that are very difficult, right? Your path, as you had seen it before this happening, was no longer your path. How did you come to find your new path? Or even the motivation to say, I am not going to allow this to define me, and I'm going to flip the script here and do something different. Like, how did that part transpire?
So throughout that 6 months, and this is part of the reason I don't get into the details, just because there was so much that happened that, we could spend an hour just talking about what happened and the specifics of it. But essentially, I think I was able to get out of the situation legally fairly easily for a number of reasons. But in my opinion, it's mainly because it wasn't true to begin with, and a handful of people helped me with that, um, including people connected to the other party. So the drama that came afterwards is they actually went after like a sibling of mine legally, and like it just, yeah, there was a number of other things that happened to kind of drag out the process and make it harder for me to move on. And I can't put the blame on them entirely, obviously, because I internally was not moved on. Obviously, I would say depressed is the right word, throughout that time, which of course, yeah, most people are understanding when they hear that. But I would say probably about 6 months later, we're probably going to talk about a couple things that I'm not super familiar with talking about, and might be some controversial thoughts.
Okay.
But the first thing I'll say right off the bat is my experience and my thoughts are for me personally. So, for the listeners and for you yourself, CK, if you have different thoughts or different avenues, full respect and no judgment whatsoever. But so I would say, if I'm going to be completely transparent, about 6 months later is when, I would say the mental shift that a lot of people have, where it's just, I got to get myself out of this. There's no hero that's going to come pick me up and take me to success and take me to a happy life. That's just not how it works.
I
So
agree.
the first thing that clicked for me is I started to get a little bit more religious. I was raised in a pretty religious home, but didn't take it super seriously, at least towards, the end of high school, towards 18, around that time, which I think is pretty common for most people for every religion. So about, 6 months after that whole situation had kind of resolved and been done and over with, that's when I decided to take religion a little bit seriously. And I actually went through like a program for recovering from like porn addiction, which porn addiction, that can be a whole separate conversation. I would just say it was something that I didn't want any part of my life to have. Some people take that a little more far than I think it does. Porn addiction can be someone who watches it every now and then and just wants to get rid of it, or it can be someone who has a much worse addiction with it. But I would say either way, getting rid of any kind of negative thoughts, or depending on your thoughts, I would say inappropriate thoughts. I just tried to kind of clear that out for no reason other than self-improvement and self-clarity. I just wanted to see, it was one of those things where it's worth a shot. Let's see how it goes. And if I'm being 100% honest, I think that's kind of what catapulted me into this journey of self-improvement to get to the point where I'm at today in my business life and my career, mental health, all of the above.
I just have to stop for a second because I want to ask you a question. What part of that did you think was controversial?
Well,
Could potentially be controversial.
that, I guess that's fair. So maybe controversial isn't the best word, but I know that I listen to a lot of like just health related podcasts in general and health related content because that's my industry. And I know the whole porn topic is something that people go back and forth on. So that's why I try not to say anything too much, because some people think it's okay, some people don't. And then on top of that, some people are religious and some people are not. So that's kind of what I was saying there.
So, okay. So when you said this initially, I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be the first interview where I'm like super uncomfortable and like at one of those junctions where I'm like, do I put this out in the
I
world?
apologize. I'm
No,
so
it's fine.
sorry.
No, don't apologize. What I love about this conversation so far is your vulnerability. And it's 5 a.m. where you are, and you're being vulnerable with me. And I appreciate that. So, first things first, I come from a very religious background. My parents are preachers.
Okay.
So, I grew up in the church. Now,
Very cool.
I am what most would consider controversial because I am a gay Christian. But I
Gotcha.
love God
Okay.
and pray and live to be like Jesus, if you will. I'm not
Yeah.
saying Jesus was gay, but I'm just saying that, like,
I
he's
get
in
what
my
you're saying.
heart,
Absolutely.
all of those things. And I think that when it comes to religion, it is one of those hot topics because people do get really like, they kind of like shrivel up when it's talked about because of their experiences. Or they have, we have some really crazy Christians, and I hear quote those in life, right?
For sure. For sure.
That give a lot of Christians bad names. So I think that that's really cool. Can I ask what denomination you are?
You can. That's another thing that I don't typically talk about, but I was actually raised in a Mormon household.
Oh, okay.
And as of right now, again, if I'm going to be vulnerable and transparent, I haven't been super active in it for the last few years, for no particular reason other than just focusing more on my career and my life, which obviously has paid off. But I have no issues, no no arguments. I would say not just the Mormon religion, but every religion just is full of great people and full of a lot of great practices. And in my opinion, every religion and every individual on planet Earth that has a purpose and has a belief, we're all here on the same team, just trying to make our lives better, you know?
And isn't that the most important message, though, right?
Absolutely.
At the end of the day, is that regardless of what you practice in whatever religion or denomination that you are, to show up every day and just be a kind, good human, I think that that's a core of what all religions are trying to achieve, and being the best version of yourself in the eyes of the Lord or the eyes of whomever you pray to.
Exactly.
So, that's how I live, right? So I think I love that you said that because it's such an important message to say, is that just be who you are, have your beliefs, be kind, that sort of thing.
Absolutely.
So the program that you went through to help with porn addiction, regardless of what severity it might have been, I don't think that that's important because we have people out here, and it's so taboo. You are right, but we have people out here who are struggling with sex addiction, porn addiction. It's a real thing.
Absolutely.
Addiction comes in all shapes and sizes. And so being able to talk and share that vulnerability about it is important because while I'm not, being listened to by millions, maybe one day, it could help a single individual understand that it's not so taboo and people do go through this. And for someone who's 25 years old to be open and vulnerable about their experience, that unconsciously gives another individual the right to do the same, right?
Absolutely.
So you went through this program and this changed you.
Absolutely.
How did it change you? What do you feel shifted in your brain?
That's a really good question, actually. So I would say the first thing I would mention is that when I went to this program, it's one of those things where there's weekly meetings you can go to and meet up with. Obviously, you don't have to. It's just like any other addiction recovery type of program.
Yeah.
And when I went, there was people who had been struggling for 30 years. And that applies to every type of addiction and every type of struggle that people have. And for me, I want to say from the time I first started, it was, I want to say 4 weeks, about a month later, I was pretty much done with it. And not done with the program, but, didn't touch porn, didn't touch anything like that. I just had this shift in my brain that I am capable of doing something, even if it sounds hard internally. And because of that, I was able to essentially just throw it in the garbage easier than I think a lot of people would have.
Do you remember the clip? Like the click is what I meant to say, not clip. Do you remember the click? Like what it was someone said or you read or an experience that you had during going to these things that was just like, damn, I am able to just discard this and move on and build a life for myself?
I don't know if there was really a click for me necessarily. I'm sure there was, but it was kind of within that 4 weeks. It was when the click happened.
It was
if that
just a
makes sense.
shift.
So it wasn't like an
transition.
overnight thing. It was just after a couple weeks of putting effort into this. And I should mention as well, I was taking like therapy fairly seriously. I was meeting with a therapist to talk about what I went through, previously, on top of everything else in my life, just trying to be vulnerable and pick apart everything that I could improve and can change my perspective on.
So you went to therapy on your own accord?
Are you asking like if someone else pushed
Was
me to
like,
therapy?
yeah, or did you go on your own?
So it was pretty much offered to me through my church. They said, hey, we have a therapist that we work with that we cover most of the cost for if you're interested. And I said, yeah, let's do it. Why
So
not?
I would classify that 100% without a doubt that you went to therapy.
For sure. No, for sure.
You weren't mandated, you weren't
me.
pressured or anything like that. So
For
like,
sure.
if we're just looking at the situation that you were in and you were dealt, and the onion of drama and trauma and feelings
Everything
that
else.
would have happened during that time, because we don't know as an audience or even as a host, but we know that it was severe enough to affect an 18-year-old.
For sure.
You came out of it with, you went to therapy on your own, like on your own at like 18, 19 years old, right? Like, and you're a dude. So we're just gonna, dudes don't typically talk about their feelings at that time.
Absolutely.
So, right? So I think that requires an applaud right there. And it's something that other people can learn from, is that you went and you did the therapy. You went to this program. So it was like you were focused on the work and the healing and moving on.
For sure.
And I think you moved on in a pretty big way, but we're going to take a quick break and we're going to talk about that right after. We'll be right back.
Life in Stitches by CK Sims. Available for purchase in paperback and ebook on all major platforms. Partner today with CK Sims and Poddin My Noggin to get in front of an audience that cares. You will be supporting mental health stories, tales of resilience, and uplifting content, aligning your brand with bringing goodness, authenticity, and kindness front and center. This spot could be yours. Do you have a story of struggle and resilience? One that you want to share with others and possibly help someone through their own struggles? Find the link in the show description and fill out the guest form today.
Welcome back, everybody. Before the break, we were talking to DJ Van Deventer.
Nailed it. Yep.
Okay, perfect. All right, perfect. About his life around 18. If you haven't watched the previous segment, just watch it. It's pretty intense, and what you went through. But we also talked about all the steps that you started to take to just shed and move forward. So we did the program, we did therapy, and then what was your first step? What was like after you did all of these things and you realized that, you know what, okay, I'm going to build a life for myself that's successful. What was your first moment or opportunity that you sort of seized on?
So since you asked, and since I've been as open as I can be already, I actually served a Mormon mission and was a missionary. And it was something that I had zero interest in at the beginning of, those 4 weeks. And by the end of the 4 weeks, my boss at the time he also was raised in the Mormon church, but didn't really practice it. So I just talked to him around the time of that 4-week mark. I just talked to him. I said, hey, I might go on a mission just to give you a heads up. And
the full 2 years?
So I actually didn't make it to the 2 years because of COVID. COVID sent me home a few months early.
Well, that makes sense. You didn't
Yep,
really
because
have
it was
control over that situation. So
exactly.
I will tell you
Yep.
that I'm the type of person, I don't care what religion you are, people are people, right? I have met and had in my past life Mormon missions
Hmm.
elders
Hmm.
come and say, come and work for me as part of their community service.
For sure, that's awesome.
And they were any of them that I ever met were just really wonderful, well-rounded people, good sense of humors, um, um, just yeah, and just the sense of community that they have. So I worked at an arts council, right?
Okay.
And we had summer programs. So they
Hmm.
came and helped us deliver these summer programs. And they were very dependable and reliable. And there's like so many hours that they had to do in a week,
Yeah.
if I remember correctly. And we just like, yep, we'll give you all of your hours that you
Yep.
need,
Very cool.
because they were super helpful, but also very young, right? So
For
that's
sure.
one of the things that I noticed at that time was I'm like, and I remember asking lots of questions about their religion
Uh-huh.
and like learning more about being a Mormon. So you would have done the 2 years, and then, but COVID messed things up, I guess, if you will, or blessed. It depends, right? It depends on the situation for
For
every
sure.
person.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it did make a massive change to what your plans were. So you finished up your mission. Where did you go? I'm so curious. Do you mind if
So I
I
went
ask?
to North Atlanta, North Georgia.
Okay, I love that. And so you came home, and now you're in the pandemic. What do you do next? Like,
So this is very different than most of my podcasts. So I appreciate it. It's definitely a good thing. I'm just not super familiar with the conversations, so I've never talked about my life this much. But um, I would argue actually that when I got home from my mission and the pandemic hit, because that was April of 2020, so that was the thick of it, of course, when
mm-hmm.
everything, the entire world shifted at that point. I would actually argue that that might be harder than what I went through a few years before, just because within a couple days, maybe a couple weeks, excuse me, I had an idea of what the next 8 9 months would look like, and then that disappeared, and I had to figure out how to start my career and start my life when the world was ending. Well,
Well,
that's an exaggeration, obviously, but
but you know what? An exaggeration maybe now, but at the time, like no one really knew. And
for
like when it
sure.
first showed up, I think everybody just thought it was going to be a few weeks and we were going to return to normal.
Yes,
No one thought for a moment, I don't think, that the world was actually going to shut down. And
and then it did.
yes, and that it did. Um, One thing I always like to say to people when we talk about the pandemic is that we as a world went through a communal trauma, and the trauma of the pandemic and the uncertainty that lied ahead over the course of the first, say, 5 6 months,
Hmm.
that trauma changes you and changes
For
how your
sure.
brains work, the chemicals, all of that sort of thing. People expected to go back to being normal post trauma. But what they didn't recognize is that now all of a sudden things that they enjoyed, they didn't enjoy as much anymore. Or things that used to not bother them were all of a sudden big deals. So their
For sure.
coping mechanisms changed, all of these things. So it was a massive shift in humanity as well for how they process information. So you had your plan for 9 months, but then you are hit with the pandemic, and that just changed everything.
For sure.
So, what happened next?
So honestly, what I did was just went back to what I knew before, which I worked a physical labor job for a glass company, like windows and mirrors, and that's what I did before my mission for a little over a year. I want to say a year and a half.
Okay,
So I just went right back to that job, same same work, because they were, I don't remember what the term was at the time,
essential.
essential.
Yeah.
Yep, thank you. They were essential because people still needed Windows. So went back to them, went to them for full time, and I would say arguably the next year and a half there was just another time of me thinking, what's next? how can I find what the next step is? How can I keep improving? And that was where at that point, I didn't know anything about business. I didn't know a ton about really what I was going to do with my career. Um, I think something I'm sure you've heard of before is like, a shark can only grow as big as the
It's
pond
tank,
it's
yeah,
in or the bowl it's in, that
yeah.
type of thing. I would say I had plans to, become a manager, and I had that in the works, of course. I talked with the owners, had plans on to do X, Y, and Z with the company, but it just wasn't something I was passionate about, and I knew I could do more somewhere else or do in another industry. And I would say probably maybe a year or so into the job is when I bought my first course on business and marketing specifically, and I essentially treated it since we're talking. I essentially treated it as a recovery program where this is supposed to help me change my life and help me improve in some way because I lack knowledge in a certain department. So if I figure out that knowledge and use it wisely, then I can excel in that way and hopefully compound it with other areas of my life. And that's kind of been my theory moving forward since my experience.
That's fascinating. It's fascinating because I think what something else that you possess now at 25, I don't know if this existed at 18 because I didn't know you or we
Mm-hmm.
hadn't talked before. You have a high EQ.
Thank you. Wow, thank you.
So it is so it's like I appreciate your vulnerability today, and I can understand that you didn't join this podcast at 5 a.m. to think that you were going to talk so much about your person and psyche and all of that stuff. But I appreciate that we kind of
For
came here
sure.
because I think that there's an element of that vulnerability that needs to be heard, and to speak it out loud is important as well, because there are other people, as you said, that have gone through similar situations
Mm-hmm.
that can benefit from this. So you took this program. Was it like a university course? Was it like one of the business and marketing like courses from one of the gurus? Like,
I would say it was more of a guru type of thing. It was something I just found on social media, and it was a pretty expensive course that was not a diploma, not a degree of any kind. No, it wasn't a college course by any means. Um, but I would argue it was probably better in a lot of cases because it gave me a ton of education in terms of like different social medias and how to utilize them the best. And I would say after I did get up and running, I was able to grow a TikTok from 0 to 10,000 followers in about 6 months or so, just based off the knowledge I learned there. And that was only a small part of what I learned from the entire course. So,
well, and I think that that's really important too. And I'm noticing a theme I want to come back to later.
mhm.
So I'm just going to make a quick note so I don't forget, because I have a goldfish mind. Perfect. Okay. So you did this. It's interesting. So I think that university and college have their places, right? I think
Mhm.
that university really helps teach with critical thinking, that sort of thing. And you're going to want university if you're going to be like doing a very important role like a doctor or
Yes,
like that sort of thing, right? That's
absolutely.
all of that stuff. College is more practical, where you can go out and you can do this, but even then it's still structured with your electives and things like that. So
Hmm.
I'm of the mindset that just because someone doesn't have a university degree or a college degree or master's or something like that does not mean in any way, shape, or form that they're not the right person for a job,
Absolutely.
because you can't teach ethic and you can't teach your mentality. So
100%.
for me, I think that a lot of people who are out there right now, if given the chance, they could blow the roof off a position, right? Even though it might say you need a BBA or an MBA, all of those things. People have the knowledge, like, and could apply it to that role and just blow it out of the park. But they're often not given that opportunity because it's on paper they don't look right.
Yeah, 100%.
Right? So you got this course. It taught you a lot of things. You use it as a recovery program. You grew a TikTok from 0 to 10,000, which is fascinating because social media is lost on me. But when did you start noticing that this course and all of its teachings were really like ingrained in what you were doing in your professional life?
To be 100% honest, I really didn't. It was one of those things where I just jumped at it and said, let's see where this goes. Kind of like, what I did with the recovery program in the first place. Just,
Mm-hmm.
let's see how this goes and shoot for the stars, see what happens, I guess. Well, not even shoot for the stars, shoot for whatever's out there that could be better than where I'm at right now.
Fair.
Is kind of the approach, a better way to explain it. I would say the reason I got the marketing course is because it was one of those things where I didn't know anything about anything regarding business or how to run a business, how to start one. And that gave me a base knowledge. And the reason I picked marketing is because pretty much everything in every industry needs marketing. Almost every company needs marketing, more or less. So that's what made me go with the marketing course for that reason. And then after doing the marketing, I'd say I probably did it for about 2 years before realizing that I sucked at sales. And that's when I started to shift at that point, because I was like, I'm getting pretty good at finding people and growing an audience, that type of thing. I don't know how to do the rest. So that's what led me to, move on in a different way.
So you wanted to learn sales then?
If I'm being 100% honest, I didn't want to. I just knew that it would probably be beneficial and I'd probably learn a lot from it. And
So what did that look like? Because I too just I suck at sales. I can tell you the benefits and pros of this desk.
Mhm.
But if I want you to buy it, if it's like, if you attach that I need you to buy this so that I can make rent, it's not going to happen. Like, because I shut up. I can talk to anybody about pretty much anything. But
Mhm.
sales is just a no go for me, which is also a
Gotcha.
disappointment because I did not get it from my dad. My dad was an incredible salesman before he became a minister,
Oh, wow.
and his belief was be honest. And he was always honest about, so he wouldn't sell somebody something that they didn't need just because his commission might get higher. He
Mhm.
would listen and then sell them what they needed and the best quality of that. And he really could just, sell ice cubes to a polar bear in winter. Like if he was that skilled at it. I just did not possess that skill. So, but yeah, so you didn't want to learn sales, but you thought that you could benefit from it from a professional, personal area.
For sure. So I would say, just to kind of put it in perspective, before I started into TikTok, I'd never really been in front of a camera. Obviously, I had my acting experience, but that was years before and
Mm-hmm.
very different than having no script and just being your raw self in front of a camera. So that took me from, one level of extroverted, I guess you could say, the small level of extroverted up to, a little bit farther. And then sales is a whole different category of talking to people and figuring out things actively, on the spot.
Yeah.
So how I transitioned there was I purchased another course actually that was a little bit different. It was a marketing course again, but it also focused on closing sales as well. So I
Okay.
purchased another course that I actually really enjoyed and definitely learned from. And then I went into a high ticket sales job, I would say, selling remodeling for a company
Okay.
that I would not promote or suggest anyone work for by any means. I won't say names, but for the company, I worked probably 100 hours a week just doing sales calls at people's homes for remodeling jobs. And I did that for about 9 months, 6 days a week, all I did every single day.
Were you successful in it?
Yeah, I did pretty well. Met a lot of really cool people. I right off the bat was a performer, I would say, because of a number of reasons. Probably because I was a missionary and was comfortable talking to people in their homes because of that, as well as like the marketing experience gave me a lot of knowledge in terms of business and helping people as well.
you're just stacking skills there, right? Like,
Yes.
because it's, if we think about our toolkits, the experiences that we've had in our lives, and we look at what it took to do those things, when we transfer those skills over to any new endeavor, we're already coming with a lot of the tools that we need to do the job. We might just be missing one or two pieces.
Yep. Absolutely.
So, so that's really cool. And then you got into, so you finished with this particular company. How did
Mhm.
you get linked up with Dr. Telx?
So the story there is I worked the sales job, and then I don't know how specific I want to get, but there was a lot of just decisions, and the management did not have morals that lined up with mine, is more or
Mm-hmm.
less how I'll say it, for in a number of ways. Um, so it was one of those decisions where within a couple days I said, I'm done. I quit. There's no 2 week notice because it's a commission job. It's
Yeah.
just as soon as you say you're done, you're done. So I sent in a resignation email with nothing else lined up for me other than a savings account,
Mm-hmm.
which I wouldn't suggest most people do, but obviously it ended up working out for me. So I had my saved up money and thought, you know, I can get a job within a few months, but it'll be nice to take some time off, visit with family. Actually, during that time, I took about 6 weeks off between my next job. And during that time, I took my sister to drop her off for her mission,
Oh,
and just
nice.
spent some time with my parents, because working 100 plus hours a week, 6 days a week, I never visited my family. I never talked to them. It's one of those things where it's something I'm learning a lot more now. Just recovery or spending your time the way you want to is way more important than being productive in terms of work or whatever that means to you.
You have to have a balance.
For
There has
sure.
to be a balance.
For
Otherwise, you're
sure.
going to suffer in so many other areas that are really important.
Absolutely. And that's something I've learned a lot as of recently, just because that looks different to everyone.
Yes,
So,
it does.
you know, I feel like it was one of those things where I just kept telling myself, I'm not good enough. I need to work harder when I'm already pushing the limits in a number of ways, which is good and bad for its own reasons, but it obviously depends on the individual. So I ended up getting a job selling medications, selling pharmaceuticals for a medical company.
Okay.
And long story short, that is what connected me with Dr. Telx to get it up and running, to essentially do everything from hiring the doctors, training them how to use the platform to prescribe on the website that we use, and the rest is history. Since I have a background in marketing and sales, I do all the marketing and sales right now. Obviously, eventually it'll grow and we'll outsource that stuff, but I'm pretty much just running everything that I can with a limited crew, with the owner
But
and I.
being
Just
compensated for your time.
correct,
Okay.
100%. Yes.
Good, good. That's the old person in me making sure, looking out for you. But so that's really cool, right? And I think you seem to have from like when I was looking at your LinkedIn, like a interest in health, mental health,
Hmm.
um, promoting all of that stuff. This probably reflects from the experiences that you've had.
For sure.
Um, so one of the themes that I've noticed in our conversation today, so like we're almost at time, but I wanted to bring this up. So you were dealt a shitty experience, okay, right?
100%.
Um,
Yeah.
and you, I'm very fascinated with the idea that you, even at a young age, were able to sort of just conceptualize that you wanted more, and to have more you needed to do more, right?
Yeah. For sure.
To try and grasp onto knowledge and learn and grow. So the theme that I noticed is that there, when you're talking about yourself, and it's one of those things, right? You didn't. It's 5 a.m. Well, it's closer to 6 now, and where you are.
Hmm.
You did not expect to have such a personal and vulnerable conversation at this hour with a stranger. But I do notice that there's a little bit of insecurity there when you talk about yourself. And I think when you flip that around and you're talking about business marketing and all of those things, you feel
Hmm.
very confident in what you're saying.
For
But
sure.
then there's a little bit of a uncertainty about certain things or how people are going to behave,
For sure.
but I think you just kind of brought that out anyway, because there's a lot of, you just said that you often think that you're not good enough or you have to do more.
For sure. Absolutely.
So I want to tell you, and this is my opinion
Mm-hmm.
so far of just having that vulnerable conversation with you and then reading your socials and things like that, is that you are good enough. And you have to recognize as a 25-year-old what you've achieved, what you were dealt, and what you were able to make of that situation, um, and how you're where you're just at 25 years old is a massive achievement. But I'm not talking just about the fact that you're CEO of Dr. Telx and you're doing all of these things. I'm talking
Mm-hmm.
about how you've shaped your life and mind.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's paramount for 25. And I will tell you something. Most 25-year-olds, and if I look back at me at 25, I was a dumpster fire. So um, I think you need to find pride in what you've done so far and stand on that. And pride doesn't mean that you become cocky or anything like that,
Yeah,
but
for
just
sure.
feeling a little bit more solid in what you bring to the table, not just as a sales and marketing person, but as a human being.
Thank you. Yeah, I
Does that make
appreciate that.
sense?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Thank you. And just to kind of respond in a way that I think will make you understand me a little bit more is when I jumped into the podcasting and as I'm trying to essentially grow my personal brand a little bit more, it's one of those things where I figured personal life is something I should be open with. And again, obviously, as you've learned, not something that I've talked a lot about or I speak with a lot of confidence on. So that is one of the reasons, like, just being on podcasts and trying to talk about my personal life is something that I'm hoping will excel me even more than where I'm at today. And
I think that and this is just it. Like, so I think that to talk about one's personal life
mm-hmm,
and to be vulnerable on the internet, it's a big deal,
for sure,
right? To
absolutely,
talk about these things, especially with the particular situation that came up at the beginning of our conversation, because there are other people involved and there are some legalities involved as well, right?
yes,
So you have to be mindful. Um, what I would suggest for you, as just someone giving advice, you don't have
mm-hmm,
to take it, is think about, even maybe journal what
mm-hmm,
has happened and clearly define what you can share and cannot share. And then if it's something that comes up, if you really want to be vulnerable, and this is your choice. This is
mm-hmm.
not the host's choice or
Yeah, yeah,
any of those things. But if there's an area where you could talk about it, but you're not sure you're talking about it, ask yourself why you're not sure you want to talk about
okay,
it.
yeah,
And it might still be that that, you know what, this part of my life is for me. It is off limits to the public. That's okay. Because it's about you. We live in a world where you don't have to put every single thing out there.
for sure.
But like today, for instance, you didn't expect to be talking about your personal stuff, but you did a great job talking about and
Thank you.
showing vulnerability. So I think, DJ, that if you continue on this path, that at 30, you're just going to you're going to achieve the success. If you maintain the
Thank you.
EQ, you maintain the vulnerability and the kindness, I think that good things are going to come to you.
Thank you. I appreciate that, CK.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much for coming on the show and being here today. Let's ask one question.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see. Actually, you know what? I'm going to make a holiday question
Okay.
because we're in the holidays and I have a Christmas tree in the back. What is your favorite thing to do around the holidays?
It might be a boring answer, but honestly, I would say spend time with family. Just because I'm so focused on projects and my career every other day and every other time of year, um, I would just say spend time with family. But if I'm going to be more specific, I would say something people don't know about me is I like to cook. So maybe make a really nice unhealthy meal, enjoy the time. I know that's terrible coming from someone who's in the health space, but
I
um,
think health is moderation,
for sure, for sure. And
right?
I've looked a ton into dieting, fitness, X, Y, and Z, and um, someone that I've been working with closely in business and in health, he told me, how did he word it? He said, essentially, abs are hard to find at the grocery store nowadays, so you might as well enjoy it while you can around Christmas time.
Well, and it's true. It's funny because just getting fit at 43, I've been on this journey all
Mm-hmm.
year. I'm not being super restrictive with my diet. I'm still eating for fuel. I'm trying to eat for fuel more. I still
Mm-hmm.
indulge, but I work out daily. And the
Awesome.
goal for that
Good for
was
you.
just to be, I'm 43, so I'm getting older. It now I'm making voluntary noises when I get up off the couch or sit down. So to try and help with that, I'm going to work out and get my bones and joints like
Good for you. Yeah, that's
better.
awesome.
All right, and spending time with family at the holidays is not a boring answer. I think that's a wonderful answer. What specifically would you do with your family at the holidays? What's your favorite thing to do with your family?
We don't really have traditions, but one thing I would say that we do every now and then, which some people think is good, some people don't. Um, we actually watch like old VHS videos of like, our family way back in the day, back in,
I
when we were
love
little
that.
kids. I feel like that's something that more people could do that would probably bring their families closer together. Look at old
I
pictures, look at old videos.
I can't believe that people would actually be think that that's not good. Like I think that that's beautiful. And what a way to connect. Like when you reminisce and you think back at all the fun times,
Hmm.
like I think it just helps create that cohesion
Absolutely.
in the current times, right? Like and you look at your lives and how you've grown. I love that. I love that idea.
Thank you.
I'm totally having like a visual in my mind now of those Hallmark type movies where the
Hmm.
family's all sitting around and they have the thing going, looking at
Yeah,
old movies and playing in the snow and all of that fun jazz. That's what I'm imagining when you said that. So,
that's how it is. Yeah.
all right. Well, I thank you very much for coming on the show this morning, especially that it's so early for you. And thank you for being vulnerable.
Absolutely.
What's next?
So for me, I feel like it's a good thing to finish with. Is I'm working on a platform. I'm not sure if you read it in my page, but
I did.
I'm working on a platform essentially to help people with their health. With my experience, I'm focusing on cognitive function and mental health recovery. Obviously,
Yep.
as you can understand from this episode, why I want to go that route. And I have a partner who she's my girlfriend actually, and she has a lot of experience in personal training and physical therapy. So she's focusing more on like just improving body movement, improving essentially at home physical therapy, and just lowering back pain, leg pain, everything you can think of in terms of recovering physically. Whereas I'm trying to do the other
The other
side,
side. But
recovering
it's
mentally.
holistic, right? Because I
For
think
sure.
we hold stress in our bodies, which causes us to have physical ailments and problems. So if
Hmm.
we focus on a holistic mind body approach, then we could live very healthy lives,
Absolutely. Yeah.
right? When's this platform coming out? Because I'm interested in this back pain thing.
So I would say probably around maybe end of January, February is when
So not too
both
long from now.
both programs should be up and running. That's
I love
that's
this.
a rough time frame, but
Well, and of course, so I'll just have to keep checking back to see when it's up and
for sure.
accessible. And then we'll do a shout out on the show again in the future when it's up. And is there a name for the program that we can watch out for?
So the website is fitnessblueprints.fit.
Fitness, I saw this. Fitness
Yes.
Blueprints, sorry, dot fit. Okay, perfect. So everybody keep an eye out for fitnessblueprints.fit. Keep an eye out for DJ and what he does next. And once again, thank you for being here. For everyone who is at home, until next time, go out there and live your wildest dreams.
For media and sponsorship inquiries, email info@ccsims.com or visit ccsims.com and fill out the contact form. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. A new episode airs every Saturday. CKS Media.